I knew at a very young age I wanted to be on the radio, and that was the main thing to me. It wasn't I hear sometimes from kids who are like, God, I'd love a job in sports, and I would say, well, what are you talking to me for? I don't work in sports. For me, it was I wanted to work in radio. I cannot pinpoint for you the exact moment that I made that determination, but it was really young. And as hokey and again, understanding our age, so this is pre-podcast, pre-internet, a lot of different options. Radio was just a more sort of omnipresent part of everybody's lives when I was growing up, and it was a big part of mine.
Mo Egger, I look at you as, thanks for stopping in for the show today.
Yeah.
I look at you as being the voice of sports in Cincinnati.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure it is, but still, we like to be ridiculous around here.
That's ridiculous.
But hey, your history is, I think you've been doing the Mo Egger show on 1530, ESPN 1530 since 2007.
Yeah.
Right? So 2007, you now have the Mo Egger podcast, so welcome to that party, and that's on iHeartRadio.
You can get it on the iHeart app, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Or moegger.com.
I don't know what the website. It's not Mo Egger. Moegger.com is like, if you go there, it's a bunch of Chinese and Japanese graphics.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do that. It just, wherever you get your podcasts, just look for the Mo Egger podcast, which is currently on hiatus because football season. You're lucky I'm here because I never have any time during football season.
Well, you're awesome, so thank you for coming.
Sure.
So I figured you were going to roll in here with a bunch of Skyline chili bags, man.
There's one across the street.
I'm thinking after this, I better go buy you some. And actually, you shouldn't have to pay for any of it. You should have a card. You walk in with a VIP card and you drop it and you get your food.
That's going to be. I'm going to get some Cholitos to go when I get done here to go to Kenwood.
Okay. All right. So hey, you have a lot of things going on. So you're obviously everything Cincinnati sports radio. You're the sports talk guy. But with this podcast, we talk about the origin. So I want to touch on some sports stuff because I'm a rabid fan who doesn't. I'm a terrible fan of Cincinnati sports.
Yeah.
Right. So why are you a terrible fan?
I don't know. You know, that's a good question.
You want me to say, well, I'm a terrible fan first?
Yeah, please. Yeah, I'll see if I can come up with an answer for you.
Because I'm that guy when the Bengals are 4-3.
Yeah.
And we just came off of beating the Falcons, and probably, and I'm not an expert like you, but that game felt like we dominated.
Wait, you think I'm an expert?
Yeah, I do think you are. Compared to this room, you are. And everybody talking. We have a bunch of UK fans. We're on the south side of the Cincinnati. Of the
I can respect that.
You get it, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like coming out of the Falcons game that's the most dominant they looked all year, right? And then we're pumped. We're going in and playing a 2-5 Cleveland Browns team. Nobody has any respect. Deshaun's there. We got Jacoby Brissett. I didn't have any respect. I'm like, this is in the bag.
Yeah,
we got this. So I feel like the whole season's worthless now.
So I'm a bad fan because I always tend to go in the opposite direction of wherever the arrow is pointed.
Okay.
So for me, and I'm not going to say I thought the Bengals were going to lose to Cleveland, but there tends to be this thing that a lot of us do in sports where, hey, our team just won. We're good. And it doesn't work that way. Like, look at the baseball the other night, right? Baseball and football, dramatically different sports. Philly bangs out 5 homers, Game 3 of the World Series. And every writer in the country is like, see, we underestimated Philly. Look at that home crowd. Series might not go back to Houston. The next night, the Astros throw a no-hitter. And so football is not that dissimilar in that regard, that just when you think, like the Carolina Panthers are here this weekend, right? 2 weeks ago, they're tanking. They don't have McCaffrey. They fired their coach. They should have won their last 2 games. It's idiotic that we have celebration penalties in sports. They should have beaten Atlanta. Now they come to town with a head of steam, a measure of momentum. But the Bengals lost, and so, there's no way they cover the spread. Now they're in danger of losing. So I'm kind of a bad fan because right when everybody's about to jump ship, I'm waiting for the turn, right? Which always happens in sports. And when things are going well, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's neither pessimistic or optimistic. It's kind of understanding how this stuff works. And the one thing that I've kind of learned is in my 45 years is right when you think you have a team figured out, right when you think you have a sport figured out, something else happens. There's always something lurking. And so maybe I'm not a bad fan, but to me, right when there's despair, I just sort of assume naturally something good is going to happen, and the exact opposite is the case when things are going well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so you're probably a good fan. And what you are is you're realistic. Your expectations are set properly.
That's it. I'm a great fan. Yes.
Mine suck.
Yeah.
And so, let's talk about, you mentioned baseball a little bit. So it's a new world of baseball, right? So what was there? How many guys contributed to get that no-hitter? It was 4 pitchers?
4, yeah.
That's wild,
yeah.
Right? To even think, I think that may be more impressive than a starter going the whole way because they get in their groove. You got to have 4 dudes show up with their A game, competing against a World Series opponent. Correct me if I'm wrong.
On the road, I mean, I think both are impressive. I think for a starting pitcher to get through the batting order against a really good team a third time would have been insanely impressive. Each of those guys who came in are fresh, and I mean, there's always an adjustment you have to make to a new guy coming into the game. But as a team accomplishment in that ballpark with those stakes, I mean, it's one thing to have a team no-hitter. It's something else with your season on the line because you don't want to go down 3-1. And the early innings of that game, I mean, Houston exploded for a bunch of runs in the 4th or 5th. But early in that game, you're operating with not much of a margin for error. Now, when they built the 5-0 lead, you could breathe a little bit. But, yeah, I thought it was reflective, though, of kind of the day and age we're in. Because I remember the Roy Halladay no-hitter against the Reds. There was no chance that dude was coming out of the game. You kind of knew last night that regardless of if Philly got a hit or not, they were going to go to their bullpen. And they should have. It's not a game in June where you're like, all right, let's see if this guy could do this. It's game 4 of the World Series. You can't afford, especially against that lineup, to get in trouble. But, yeah, I looked at social media during the game, and it was, well, this isn't that big of a deal. And it's like, I don't know about you, in my lifetime, I've never seen a team not get a hit in a World Series game. So it is a big deal.
Yeah. Has that ever happened? Like 1969 or something? Or some rare, weird.
Don Larson, 1956.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. See, that's why you're here, man.
Yeah.
Hey, since we're talking about baseball, we're in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Another bad fan on this other team.
Yeah.
Right across the river's coming out. So correct me if I'm wrong. There was a little controversy, a little hubbub at the beginning of the 2021 Reds season.
Oh.
I don't know if you remember. I think you were a part of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you asked the question or your partner did.
Oh, I asked the question.
So, what's your thoughts on that? Do you still feel the same 8 months later?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my question was, why should fans trust you? You have a track record that's very limited. I still think it's fair to ask that. Now, I think given the direction the Reds have chosen to go in, the baseball people have done a good job of kind of replenishing the farm system. Folks who cover minor league systems and prospects to a man and to a woman, I guess, are all very impressed with who the Reds have added. You can't not acknowledge that. And I think sometimes unfairly, Nick Krall, the general manager, kind of gets lumped into the conversation about ownership, and I'm not sure that's fair. You think Nick Krall, in his first job as running a ball club, wanted to dismantle it? You think that's what he really wanted to do? No. But being told this is what you have to do, it feels like right now he's done a pretty credible job. We'll see if there's a long-term payoff. But the track record of ownership, they haven't won anything. And so my question to Phil Castellini was based on something he had said maybe 3 weeks prior. He spoke publicly at Findlay Market to announce who the Grand Marshal for the opening day parade was. And he went on this whole harangue about, media's being unfair to us, blah, blah, blah. But have some faith in us, is what he said. Have some faith. He did not take questions that day, and it wasn't a baseball event, so the people that were covering it were, no offense to those folks, they weren't people who covered the Reds. The Reds were in spring training. All the baseball people were there. So now with a chance to talk to Phil, and I took that quote, talked about it for weeks on air. I'm not the only person who did. And the question, my response to that was, faith is earned. You have to earn trust. You have to, and you've lost it. So my question was, and I'm paraphrasing myself, you guys have owned the club for 15 years. You haven't really won anything. You've had a lot of really bad years in recent history where they've lost 90-plus games year after year after year. Why should fans continue to have the faith that you're asking for?
Mm-hmm.
Now, his answer spoke for itself, but the question was, and Phil has told me this, was completely fair. You know, we're always taught performance and outcomes and track records, those are fair game. I didn't ask a question that was aimed at him personally. I didn't ask a question that was aimed at the business operations. It was a reflection of the results of the previous 15 years. Now, you're being ignorant if you don't acknowledge they had an excellent team in 2012. It's not ownership's fault. They blew a 2-0 series lead. They had a stretch from 10 to 2013 in which they went to the playoffs three times. And they did go for it in 2020, and it's certainly not their fault that COVID, wreaked havoc with everything. But the reality is, for a decade and a half, the Reds have not advanced in the postseason. The losing has outweighed the winning, especially in recent seasons. And you're asking for faith after dismantling a pretty good team last year. You're asking for faith and patience from a fan base that has exhausted those things. So why should faith and patience continue? It's a fair question. And I didn't really get any pushback from it because the people with the Reds would tell you that was a fair question, including Phil. I talked to Phil that night. And
so what do you think happened with his response? So
he wasn't ready for it.
We're correct.
Here's what I think. Here's the deal. And I've said this publicly a number of times. For about 14 years, Reds ownership enjoyed the benefit of the doubt that you could argue they maybe didn't earn. And part of that is based on things they've done to build the brand. The Reds Community Fund is awesome. Reds Fest is awesome. The All-Star Game, the Hall of Fame, the way they've built this brand. And, in Castellini bought the team, and then after that there was this slow and steady influx of Joey Votto, Jay Bruce, Drew Stubb, Devin Mesoraco, Johnny Cueto, all these guys, right? Prior to last season and during last season was the first time that ownership specifically got any sort of public pushback, and they haven't been prepared for it. And
do you think that's a nature of professional sports? Do you think it's just kind of a given in everybody's town because, you're in touch on it, what other option do you have if you want to be a baseball fan? Is that just their inherent built-in nature?
Could be. Yeah, it could be. I think Phil to this point has been kind of and I don't say this disparagingly, has been the bobblehead guy. He was the guy that would come on the air and talk about, hey, here's what's new at Great American Ballpark this year. We've got a bar down the right field line, and we're giving away bobbleheads, and we've got a new menu item. And there's a place for that, and that was always Phil's role. And, I would have Phil on. They would always ask to get him on the air before the season started to talk about what's new at GABP. Not about free agency or trades or the makeup of the team. That wasn't his bailiwick. Well, now he's kind of the guy. He's the face
of the organization.
All things Reds.
Yep.
And boy, there's a lot that comes with that because nobody's going to push back against bobbleheads or what's new at the ballpark, but they're going to push back when they see their favorite players getting traded away, and they're going to push back against not making the postseason. And I just don't think Phil, what stood out to me more than anything about what he said wasn't what he said, it was how unprepared he was to give a more diplomatic answer. And then he obviously did a TV interview, and he basically doubled down. And I thought that was, people blasted Reds PR. Phil's an adult.
Yep, he's the president of the team, correct?
Yes. Phil came over to do a broadcast with us, understanding the climate and understanding my point of view. I've had conversations with Phil about my point of view, and he had to have known that question was coming. And what stood out to me was how seemingly unprepared he was for it. I don't think Phil's a bad guy. I don't think Phil's an incompetent executive. I think he has not been prepared to be the face of all things Cincinnati Reds, and the ownership group they really have never had. Whenever the Reds had failed prior to last year, the arrow was pointed at the manager or at a general manager. Now it's being pointed at ownership, and I just don't think they've been ready for that.
You know why they should have been ready is because we've lived in this town where it was pointed at the Brown family forever.
Sure.
Right? We didn't really blame the head coaches that often, even though all those years as being a Bengals fan, it sucked. Those 2-14, 3-13, and I just go back to those Achilles Smith days and I'm just like, what is going on? And so our upset at the Bengals was always pointed at Mike Brown, wasn't it? So that's weird.
A little bit different because Mike is viewed as, well, he inherited the team and doesn't deserve it. Plus, the way, as much as they deny this, the Bengals threatened to move in 1993. They flirted with Baltimore. They strong-armed taxpayers into building a stadium at an exceptionally team-friendly deal. And they also haven't been good at PR. Mike Brown and the Bengals do a ton of really good things that they don't publicize. The Reds do a ton of really good things that they wisely publicize, and Bob Castellini didn't strong-arm taxpayers into building Great American Ballpark. He wasn't the owner. He is viewed as somebody who earned the Cincinnati Reds through his hard work. Now, Bob certainly had a pretty good runway in life as well. So I think the dynamic has been a little bit different, and people also, I think there's a level of sympathy is probably not the right word. Baseball's economics are different. Football's economics are different than baseball's.
Yep.
In football, the Chiefs and the Steelers and the Packers compete. Why aren't the Bengals? Right? Mm-hmm. It's salary cap league. There's a little bit more socialism in the league, whereas with baseball, the Reds are facing an uphill battle compared to the Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, and Phillies. We know that, and so to a degree, we've been willing to give the Castellinis a break. But, it turned prior to the 2021 season when, coming off the shortened season when they made the playoffs, they looked at that team and not only didn't make it any better, but they made it worse by giving away relief pitchers. And I think that was the first time that folks really believed the Reds aren't trying to win. I mean, I remember vividly in 2015 when they traded away Johnny Cueto, and after that they traded away Todd Frazier, and spending a lot of time criticizing the Castellinis for not embracing a rebuild sooner. And then as the rebuild would drag on, expressing impatience with the fact that there's seemingly no end to this. And I had a lot of people that would call me on the air and defend ownership. They got a pass for a very long time. The pass expired, and they weren't ready for it. Now, again, you could certainly convince me that in a couple of years this team could be pretty competitive because of some of the things they've done to flip established talent for players who are going to be good down the road. Again, people who cover this sport rave about some of the players the Reds have and that they've acquired in their farm system. And the difference between now and 6-7 years ago is they got a trio of starting pitchers who are worth building around. But it is going to take a very long time. I've wondered often, who's going to be the voice of what they're doing? Because I'm not sure Nick Kroll is great at that, and nobody wants to hear from Phil. Who's going to be the voice of that moving forward is maybe not that interesting to many, but it's interesting to me.
So it seems like in the current sports environment, we see Belichick out here in his press conferences, and it seems like transparency isn't the norm. And so when we were talking about maybe Phil wasn't prepared, is it because they're always trying to tell a story and paint a facade every time? So we haven't talked about the Bengals really too much and the Zach Taylor part. It seems like every time I listen to a press conference of an NFL coach, and it carries over, it seems like I'm watching a morning presidential briefing where you just know you're not going to get full transparency and the truth.
They're a waste of time. I don't attend them. I don't listen to them. They're a waste of time. You're not going to get anything necessarily revealing. And if I was a head coach, does it serve me or my team any good to spill our secrets? No. So we joke all the time. We have to air Zach Taylor's press conferences. We carry the Bengals game. It's a part of our deal. And I always joke about how, because these coaches are so important, you mentioned presidential briefings. NFL coaches have 3 press conferences per week. The president of the United States doesn't have to give any, regardless of who the president is. No, I mean, they're not going to be that forthcoming. Now, I mean, I don't think many have to be as surly as they are. And Zach Taylor, to his credit, is affable. And the people, everybody who covers that team would tell you this guy's cooperative and he's a good guy, but, he's not shouting down dumb questions. And a lot of coaches do. Zach doesn't do that. But it's rare that I have walked away from one of those media sessions thinking, wow, I really learned something about the team. That those press conferences exist for people to get sound bites. That's why. That's why you're not going to learn anything.
So we're jumping around all over Cincinnati sports, but you touched on earlier about the economics of the Cincinnati Reds versus teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees. So explain to us, when we hear small market team, what does that mean, us being a Cincinnati Reds fan?
Well, for a lot of people, it's an excuse, and for ownership, it's not an excuse, because when they bought the team, we were a small market. And so I've had people get mad at me because I hold Bob Castellini accountable for what he said when he bought the team, which was, we'll bring championship baseball to Cincinnati. There was no qualifier to that. It wasn't, we're going to bring championship baseball to Cincinnati if our market size increases, or if I move the team to New York. It was, we're going to bring championship baseball to Cincinnati. Now, if you go into Bob Castellini's office and you're running one of his businesses and you go, Bob, I'm going to do this, he's going to hold you to that. Why, as a fan, shouldn't I hold him to that? He didn't. Well, you know what? If we get an influx of money, or if baseball adopts a salary cap, we're gonna bring championship baseball.
That's what we were sold on.
So baseball's economics, it's quite simple. To each their own, right? Tickets, money, television revenue. It's not like the NFL where everything gets thrown into a pool, with a few exceptions, like luxury suites. In the NFL, everything gets thrown into basically in the same pool. Baseball's a lot different. So. The Yankees have more money, and the Mets have more money, and the Cubs have more money, and that's fine. The two things I would say to that would, number one, be, well, we just had a lockout that was supposed to solve that, and it didn't. So what was the point of the lockout? I mean, the lockout solved. We have one more playoff team per league, which just increases the amount of revenue teams are going to make. Okay, but it didn't solve the economic disparity in my lifetime. We've had a work stoppage in 81, 85, 94, obviously. Almost had one in 02. Lockout in 1990, and a lockout this offseason. All have in some way been aimed at solving economic disparity in baseball. None have.
Why?
Because at the end of the day, neither side is really going to hold out for what they want. Players did in 94. You might have hated it, but players were not going to accept a salary cap. And they were the one union in sports that said, screw it, we'll miss a season, we'll miss postseason revenue, we'll go into next year. At the end of the day, baseball owners, especially coming off the pandemics, the two basically pandemic years, they weren't going to lock players out and miss the 2022 season and say, look, we're not staging baseball games until we have a salary cap.
But they should. These are business owners that own these teams.
Yeah,
they should understand leverage.
You want to tell Bob Castellini you're not going to sell tickets to 81 home games?
Well, he said we were going to get championship baseball.
I mean, you want to tell the owner of any baseball team, sit out a year? That's not going to happen. So it was this game of chicken that you knew was going to end when it ended, but it didn't solve anything. So there's that. The other thing is, we have seen small mark. The St. Louis Cardinals.
That's where I was going, man.
Have lost 90 games in a season. How many times do you think they've lost 90 games in a season?
Since when?
Since the Reds last won the World Series.
Never.
Once in 1990. They're always good. Even when they're not good, they're not bad. They're not terrible. So why do we think they draw 3 million fans a year? Because they have a plan. They have a way. And look, they have years, and they would tell you, we're not as equipped to be as good as you would like, but they're always relevant. The Reds drag us through these long stretches.
Decades.
So, and by the way, in Pittsburgh, they're dealing with the same thing. In Baltimore, they're dealing with the same thing. Baltimore had a pretty good year this year. But with the Reds, I think we all acknowledge, okay, you're going to have dips, but your dips take forever. Your dips are 98 losses in 2015, 94 losses in 16 and 17, 95 losses in 2018, 87 losses in 2019, and then you're marginally good for 2 years, and then you're going to suck again for a couple of seasons. And those years that they were marginally good, they didn't advance in the postseason, right? Didn't score a run in the playoffs.
And then as a very unintelligent fan, it appears you're unloading your good players.
Right. So I think we all understand you're going to have to go through periods when you have to rebuild or reload. But you better deliver on what we waited. You better pay off the patience. The Reds never do.
So what's the common denominator in St. Louis? Like why? Is it here's what it has to be. There's different managers, right?
Sure.
Different presidents, different people running the team.
Yeah.
It has to be ownership.
Well, it's ownership, but I mean, like that franchise for 40 years has been great at developing big league talent. For 40 years. I mean, in the 80s, the Cardinals were always good. They kind of dipped a little bit late 80s, early 90s, but The formation of the National League Central, the second full season, the Cardinals won the division, and they haven't looked back. So it's ownership. There's never a deviation from the plan in St. Louis, right? It feels to me like one of my biggest gripes, and I think the biggest gripe that a lot of people have is with the Reds, there are stretches of times when it's hard to articulate what the plan is. Like an example would be in 2013, they won 90 games. They had a good team, but all season long, there was just something missing. Dusty Baker got let go at the end of the year. They let Shin-Soo Choo walk, which was the right decision. They let Bronson Arroyo walk, which was the right decision. But I remember often during that offseason going, what are they doing? They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to make their team better. They didn't do anything to make their team worse. And it was really hard to articulate what are they trying to do. It doesn't feel like they're going all in and winning in 14, and it doesn't feel like they're starting a rebuild either. There have been way too many periods like that where I think either it's been hard to identify specifically what they're doing, or right when you do identify what they're doing, they go in a completely different direction. And again, the last few years would be an example. What hovers over all of it is they couldn't sell a ticket in 2020, but in 2020, we're going for it. Castellanos, Moustakas, Shogo Akiyama, Wade Miley. We're going for it. And then a year later, we're not. And so I think the frustrating thing is, and what I will say is encouraging is, about what they're doing now, they got rid of some guys right before the lockout. They got rid of a whole bunch of guys after the lockout. My fear at the trade deadline was that they would again go, you know what? We're going to keep Luis Castillo, and we're going to go in a different direction. At least they stayed in the direction they're going in, and who knows if it's going to pay off. With the St. Louis Cardinals, the DeWitt family prior to the 2020 season complained about money. I mean, they haven't been absent of that, but you always have a sense of what they're doing from a baseball developmental standpoint. Even with the Reds, they hired this Kyle Bodie guy to oversee their pitching development, right? This was like the next big thing. This guy's going to be key to developing pitchers in a very modern, progressive, different way. And then less than 2 years later, gone. And again, you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought this guy was the next big thing, and now we're going away from that. There have been a lot of instances, for me at least, where it's hard to really specifically articulate what they're doing. That's not the case now, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's the major difference. All of us understand the economics of baseball do not favor teams like the Reds. We get it. So you're going to have to build organically. You're going to have to constantly crank out good big league talent. For the last 30 years, the Reds haven't done that. They had a period of time from 08 to like 12. Again, the Bruces, the Vados, all guys like that. But how many all-star pitchers have the Reds brought through their farm system over the last 30 years? One, basically Johnny Cueto.
That's it. So I was thinking
Luis Castillo was with two other organizations before he got here. One. Now, maybe that's changing with Hunter Green and Graham Ashcraft and Nick Lodolo, but they've been not good at developing big league talent. And the only way you succeed when the economics aren't in your favor is by developing cheap labor. Young players are cheap labor. The Reds, for years, haven't been good at that, with exceptions. And if that doesn't change, the results aren't dramatically going to change either.
Do you think a difference in, give me the large market so-called team that you have the most knowledge on? Do you think you have good knowledge just – would it be Dodgers? Would it be Yankees? Would it be Reds?
Well, the Dodgers,
Cubs?
because they've been so high profile.
Okay, so let's go with the Dodgers.
Now, here's the thing about the Dodgers, though. They don't get credit for this. They're great at developing talent. Now, they trade for Mookie Betts, and they could sign some dudes to deals that the Reds can but don't, and they can afford to make mistakes. I mean, that's the difference. Everybody can afford free agents. Mm-hmm. Not everybody can afford to fail with the free agents they sign, right?
Yep. Those are 4 or 6 teams that could probably sign 3 or 4 really big free agents.
They could all afford them, but not all can afford. Like if you're the Reds and you sign Joey Votto for $250 million, he's got to be great. And if he's not, that looks bad. Whereas the Yankees can sign Giancarlo Stanton and afford to have him miss basically 2 seasons because he gets hurt. But the Dodgers have banged out a ton of homegrown talent. They don't get credit for it because people see L.A. and the guys they bring in from outside. But at the end of the day, they're great at cranking out big league ball players.
But if they make a mistake, it's easy to cover up.
No doubt.
So,
No doubt.
So that means that a small market team, it's essential that the leader you have better be a great leader.
Well, if you make big investments, the big investments have to pay off. And so when the Reds lock into Homer Bailey for $140 million and it doesn't work, that's not Homer Bailey's fault necessarily, and it's not the Reds' fault for signing it. It just didn't work.
Throw one no-hitter against the Giants, and there you go, right?
One against the Giants, one against the Pirates. But that contract, if it doesn't work in Chicago or New York, okay, fine.
Cover it up, sign another one.
Here, that's a tough blow when you sign Devin Mesoraco and it doesn't work out. And they only gave him one more year than he was due in his original contract. But, I mean, those big investments have to pay off here. In other markets, you want them to pay off, but if they don't, the blow is softened because –
So you have to be a better owner.
You got to be better with your investments, yes.
So do you mind if we talk about – you probably know these players. So Joey Votto.
Yeah, where Joey and I hang out all the time.
I figured you did.
Yeah. Lives in my neighborhood.
I figured you guys, hey, I need a drink. It's been a tough day.
Yeah, swing by Joey's.
Hey, your owner, your president of your team just really made a mistake. I'm having a tough day.
Yeah.
Can we drink? So, has Joey Votto been the leader that a small market team or medium market team that invests $250 million, is he the guy that our team needed? Did he play the role?
Sure.
All the way around.
I don't know the leadership thing. I don't know that any of us are really equipped to comment on that.
Yep.
Honestly, I think that part is.
So the question is, are you closer to it? Do you see it more? Do you hear it?
I've not heard that he's a bad teammate. I've not heard that he's a guy that alienates his team. Everybody leads differently. I mean,
agree.
what I would say is nobody takes their craft more seriously than Joey Votto, and so.
Of a baseball player.
In the business that I work in, I identify leaders by watching people who are really good at sort of taking their craft seriously. And sports are obviously a different dynamic, but they waste when Joey signed his contract, nobody wanted to talk about what the years at the end were going to be like. Nobody wanted to. I tried. And my take at the time was this could be like using a credit card. And I don't own a credit card.
That interest is going to come due.
But, boy, you might use that credit card to pay your vacation. You better enjoy it because the bill's going to come due, and it's going to be a hell of a lot less fun. So you got to win in the short term. Joey Votto in 2015, 16, and 17 was an MVP caliber player. Came in second in 2017. The Reds lost 98, 94 games those years. Just wasted it. Wasted his prime. And, 2012 they were good, but 2012 Joey was already under contract. The contract didn't kick in, I think, until 2014. So the early years of that deal, the Reds didn't take advantage. That's not Joey's fault.
Mm-hmm. So I run a sales company.
Yeah.
Right? I don't ever promote it really on here too much. We wear the brand. But so I run a sales company.
Mm-hmm.
What I've learned in the past 20 to 25 years in corporate America and the companies that I started and that I run, there's always some people that rise to the top in the sales organizations. Mm-hmm. The 80-20 rule is fascinating because it seems like it exists everywhere.
Yeah.
But what I've found, just because those salespeople are great at sales doesn't mean they have the leadership skills to be a manager.
Yeah.
And normally they don't coexist.
Sure. The leadership thing with Joey, who was he supposed to lead?
I don't know.
So those years when the Reds really stunk.
Yeah.
Who was Joey? Was he supposed to lead these
play every position
collection of pitchers that weren't big league caliber? I mean, they were bringing up dudes that you knew were never going to survive in the big. That's not Joey's fault. And Joey did an interview with my colleague Lance McAllister, and Lance asked him, this is maybe a year after he signed the contract, and the contract hadn't even kicked in yet, but he said something to the effect of, you make a lot of money for a smaller market team, and I'm not. I'll paraphrase what Lance asked, but it was basically like, what do you say to somebody who says you make too much money given this team's relative lack of resources? And Joey said, we're going to have to be good with cheaper players. Our cheaper players are going to have to be good. That's a reality. That comes back to the organization has to be good at cranking out good big league ball players. They haven't been. That's not Joey's fault.
So question in St. Louis.
No, what I'll say about this is the drop-off for Joey, I think, was a little bit steeper than people were ready for because he should have won the MVP in 17. He was good, but not by Joey's standards in 18. Last season in 2021, he was resurgent. And so now you go, okay, well, number one, Should they have invested that kind of money into a guy who the skill set I thought was going to age well but hasn't? Did it make sense to know you were going to have to be paying a guy $25 million when he's 38, 39, 40 years old? Number two, shouldn't they have done more to try to win while he was in his prime? Neither of those things are Joey's fault. Is he a rah-rah type of guy? By his own admission, he's not. But I would say there's nobody who has approached their job with more studiousness or seriousness on that team for a very long time than Joey Votto.
So would a guy like him fit better as a number 2 or a number 3 on a Yankees, on a Red Sox, on a Dodgers, where he doesn't need to play that role? So the question is, does a baseball team need to have it? So go back to the Cardinals real quick.
Yeah.
I'm not the crazy – I don't have as much fandom as I used to.
Yeah.
Growing up, being younger, I was that guy. My blood pressure and the feeling of my heart rode on wins and losses.
Mm-hmm.
I just try to enjoy the games now.
Yeah.
However, what's been the mainstay of the St. Louis Cardinals? Hated the player for the Cardinals who just retired for the past decade and a half.
Yeah.
Who's it been?
Yadier Molina.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't understand the stats, the lines, his performance. I just know that me being a fan, not very often do I sit in diamond seats behind the plate.
Mm-hmm.
But I did when they played the Cardinals.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy seems like a guy that you want to go into battle with.
Sure.
To me as a fan, Joey doesn't give off that same vibe. And being a small market team, doesn't there have to be someone on that team that you want to go to battle with?
Sure. But I mean,
so these are questions as a fan.
I would say you don't want a guy who at his prime got on base 42% of the time and was one of the most difficult batters to retire in the sport.
100% you do.
Of course you do.
Yep, the talent.
So is it Joey's fault that he just doesn't have that personality? No.
Is it the team's job to understand that if that's a needed?
It's the organization's job to get better players.
Yeah. Remember when Scott Rowland came?
And to this day, people talk about his impact. But
I felt it as a fan. I don't know.
So here's the thing, all right? So they trade for Scott Rowland, and then they added years to his contract because I think he was only going to be here for the rest of 9, 10, and 11, and they added another year in 2012, right? Mm-hmm. They trade Edwin Encarnacion. They knew Scott Rowland was on the downside of his career. Now, he had some pretty competent years here. He was an All-Star in 2010. Played a Gold Glove caliber third base. In 2012, when Joey got hurt, Scott played third base while Todd Frazier played first, and Scott Rowland was unbelievable. But they acquired him because they had this team of young guys. He was going to bring intangibles. He was going to teach these guys how to win. And then for years, what have I heard? They never should have traded Encarnacion. So what do you want? You want the leadership or you want the production? Now, here's what I would say. Give me that dude who hit more home runs in the 2010s than any player ahead of a guy who's going to pat people on the ass. I want the production. So what do we want? Do you want – because few players bring both, right? Mm-hmm. There's only a handful of Derek Jeters. Few players are going to do both. That's just kind of how it works, right? So do you want the production or do you want the rah-rah guy? Sometimes you got to make a decision. The Reds did. Now, Encarnacion here was flinging the ball into the right field stands, and the Blue Jays got rid of him, went to Oakland, then they brought him back, and he was unbelievable. But that guy hit, I think, more home runs than anybody in the 2010s. Would you have rather had that than the rah-rah guy? Give me the dude who's going to play. I don't need a cheerleader. So what do you want? So with Joey, again, I mean, you got high-level production, insanely, some of the best offensive seasons in this franchise's history. They just didn't put a good team around him. He's playing first base while Kevin Gregg and Asher Wojciechowski are pitching, and he's looking around the diamond, and there's just not major league caliber players. None of that is on Joe. You're going to lead those guys? Mm-hmm. You're going to lead those guys? So I think that leadership part of it is, in his particular case, dramatically overrated. The criticism of him as a leader is, I think, a little exaggerated.
So I think because I try to be reasonable, and being a fan, usually reason is left on the sideline. So, but I try to be, and being a business owner, I try to bring the same reason to it. And I didn't come up with these feelings about Joey, and it's this problem solving. Like, man, what do the Reds have to do to win? It's the same thing. It's like, what aren't we doing? What should they do? Well, the shit you've done hasn't worked. Mm-hmm. So something about the dynamics, whether it's the long contract, the $25 million, Dusty, in the third game of the the game against the Giants, maybe leaving the pitcher in a little bit too long.
He didn't bring in Aroldis Chapman.
There you go.
I mean, he didn't bring in Aroldis Chapman, which is absurd.
Yeah, you have that tool and you don't use it. So everything they've done, and I mean everything, hasn't given us the fans what we want.
Yeah, they haven't won.
That's it. We want to win.
At the end of the day, you are your track record.
Yeah.
And now, what folks don't want to hear, and I don't even really want to say, but I think the Reds have acknowledged what we've done isn't working, and so now we're going to try this. Unfortunately, trying this means you're going to have to wait longer, and I mean, they haven't advanced in the postseason since I was a freshman in college, so there's a lot of folks who are like, dude, I'm tired of waiting.
Yeah.
But I think there has been an acknowledgement what we have done, the different things we have done to this point haven't worked. We now have to be great at producing talent in our farm system. And that, I mean, honestly,
that's where the conversation started, right?
Whether it was the latter years of Marge Schott's tenure or while Carl Lindner owned the team or the last 16 years with the Castellini family, they haven't been consistently good at that. And when they were, what were the results?
Really good.
When Johnny Cueto and Homer Bailey and Joey Votto and
Jay Bruce
and Drew Stubbs and eventually Todd Frazier and Devin Mesoraco and Zach Cozart and a handful of others, that combined with, the Bronson Arroyo trade was smart and the Brandon Phillips trade was smart. But, nobody knew who Brandon Phillips was. And Bronson Arroyo was like the fifth starter on the Red Sox. Some good outside acquisitions, but for this stretch of time, they got really good at producing big league players. But that's been the exception and not the rule for the last 30 years. In the mid-'80s, again, Barry Larkin, Paul O'Neill, Chris Sabo, Eric Davis.
Tom Browning,
yeah. For a stretch of time, the Reds got really good at producing quality big league players, and that came to a head in 1990.
So do you think, as a fan, because you're a fan.
Sure.
It's your job, but you're a fan.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
How long do we have to wait for this?
I think the best case scenario is they're a playoff contender in 2025. That's best case. That's hard. And I don't subscribe to the theory that you have to bail on next season, but they are, because you do have Green, Ashcraft, and Lodolo. And if you really believe in those guys, why not try to – the Phillies made the playoffs this year with 87 wins. It no longer requires – I hate the added playoff team because it just dilutes the regular season, but we have it.
You don't have to have 100 wins anymore.
You don't need to win 100 games to make the playoffs. So, all right, why not, if you believe in these starting pitchers, you could acquire talent without sacrificing prospects. Why not do that? They won't. So given what they're trying to do, it feels like the next time you could hope to watch the Reds compete in the postseason will be 2025.
So basically what we do in the meantime is go watch some soccer.
That's what a lot of people are going to do. I mean,
Is Mo?
Casually, yeah. I'm never going to be a huge soccer guy. Didn't grow up playing it. Didn't grow up watching it. But do I? Here's the thing, and in 2014, we started to talk about the World Cup on the air. The U.S., I think they made the round of 16, if
US
I'm not
men's
mistaken. And there was a watch party at Fountain Square. And I went on the air next day, and I had gotten – there was obviously no FC Cincinnati. But I had reached out to UC. They had a men's soccer program at the time, and I asked the head coach to join me after U.S. men's soccer games. And I said, look, my questions are not going to be deeply nuanced because I got to make this make sense to an audience of people who don't follow soccer closely. And I got a lot of pushback even in my own building. And I said, the next time the U.S. men play one of these games, go to a bar, go downtown. You'll be the oldest person there. This is what the young people are watching. I went to the friendly this year against Morocco. And before the game, I was at the bar across the street having a beer, and I looked around. I was the oldest person there. I'm not old. I mean, I'm not.
You kind of are.
Well, middle-aged. This is what younger people are watching. So our job is to get listeners who are going to be there for a while and to get younger. So if you are going to be completely ignorant of soccer, and you do what I do for a living, you are not doing your job. So I do it from a very honest standpoint. Look, this is a sport I know less about than basketball or football or baseball. It just is. It's not one that I grew up with. It's not one that I'm seasoned on. I'm learning more. So if I talk about it, it is from that standpoint. I try to get on guests who are going to answer questions and talk about the team that appeals to the diehard fan, but also to folks who are, you know what, I'm going to sit through this, teach me something, be entertaining about it. But if you're going to just, soccer's stupid, I'm not going to watch it, first of all, you're telling potential audience members that what matters to them doesn't matter to you. So don't come to the party.
Yeah.
I mean, that never makes any sense. So I'm very honest with my level of interest in soccer, but I'll never ignore it. And I do. I root like hell for FC Cincinnati to win. It's good. You know, it's great for the city. But no, I don't. I'm never going to be a huge soccer guy. Just
Kudos to the organization for what they've done, though, right?
This year, yeah. I mean, very few times in my life or career that I've thought, boy, I told you so. But when they moved to Major League Soccer, look, what they did to get people excited, building the atmosphere at Nippert State, they did it the right way. They did it grassroots. They sold cheap tickets. They created a great atmosphere. They built some pretty good teams. And they also did it during a time in which the Reds were just awful. So there were a whole lot of people who were like, screw it, let's go check out this soccer thing. And the team was good and everything was awesome. But when they made the move to Major League Soccer, I remember kind of asking out loud, like, aren't they going to bring in some legitimate soccer executives? And it's, Jeff Birding's got it. And I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. And I like Jeff, and Jeff has had a ton of success on the business side of that franchise and deserves a world of credit for those successes. But putting him in charge of building a Major League Soccer franchise always felt like it was filled with folly. So they've now brought in some folks who feel like they know what they're doing. Ownership has committed resources to building a good team. They have a terrific stadium.
It's awesome.
And so it feels like things are pointed upward, and I hope that continues. But, again, just from my standpoint, it's never going to be talked about more than the Bengals or the Reds. It's just not. But I know folks who do what I do who just
put their head down on it.
Yeah. And I don't think you can do that.
Yeah.
In sports, in my field, you cannot afford to do that.
From a fan experience, so I went to 2 FC games this year. Didn't buy any tickets. Somebody calls you and says, hey, yeah, I'll go. Yeah. I'll enjoy it. And one time I sat up in the nosebleeds.
Uh-huh.
The other time I was down in the club, second row next to the field. So after the game, I didn't know anything about the experience. It's like Diamond Club or Suites at the Bengals game.
Yeah.
Diamond Club at the Reds game. And afterwards, so it was full meals and dinner and all that. Afterwards, you go down, and all of a sudden, players are coming out.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you see the lenders coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You see the head coach coming out. You see Jeff Birding coming out with the fans.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I've never seen anything like that in Cincinnati for an experience. They're coming in, having a drink, shoulder to shoulder with the fans.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. People got to be able to reach out. But I think that's important in that sport because we're not talking about household names.
Yeah, okay.
If Brandon Vasquez walked into a restaurant in town, some will know who he is. Most will not. If your average Bengals player walked in, chances are. So, I mean, to a degree, I think that franchise, that's kind of the next step. Like, you got to market some of these guys and make them household names in town. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, the fan experience there, top notch.
Awesome.
In that regard, they've really, really done a good job. They've built an amazing stadium.
That's
awesome. It's a phenomenal facility. And from the point that matters most to people, they've put a pretty compelling product on the field over the last year, and hopefully, that continues
for years to come.
Yeah.
So you're wearing a hat from the Cincinnati Royals, a basketball team.
Yeah.
Who are they now? Are they the Sacramento Kings?
They are.
Okay, so will Cincinnati ever have an NBA team?
No.
Ever again? Why?
Well, I don't think there's any ownership group pressing to bring an NBA team to Cincinnati. So the two ways you get an NBA franchise, number one moves. They move in large part because they get sold. So if you're going to move an NBA team to Cincinnati,
who's the billionaire that's going to do it?
Well, let's just say you own the Sacramento Kings. All right, you want to move back to Cincinnati. Where are you going to play? Do you want to build it? Taxpayers are probably going to say no to a new arena. Can the market support 4 Major League Soccer or Major League sports franchises? Most economists will say no. I would slightly disagree with that because I think with the right ownership, anything would work.
We're 2.2 million people now.
Yeah, and what I always say to that is the NBA, it's a star league. It's an event league. So you mean to tell me Steph Curry comes to town, it doesn't get people fired up?
Selling out.
Of course it is. So I've always kind of pushed back at that. But, economists will say, like, a market of this size that has such a big college basketball presence wouldn't be conducive to an NBA team. So I think is a franchise going to move, and would the NBA approve it to Cincinnati? My guess is no. So then it's expand. Okay, well, to expand, you got to have willing owners. Who in town wants an NBA team? I haven't heard of there is one in Louisville. There's a huge movement of big-time corporate people who are like, we want a team here, and they've got an NBA. The Yum Center would need to be slightly renovated, I guess, but they've got an NBA arena. We do not. And so who are the people that would say, we want it, and we're going to do it right, and we're going to build a place to play? I don't think that exists, and I just don't think the NBA would want a team here. The NBA has done really well in markets like San Antonio. There's no other major sports. Utah, there's no other major sports. Memphis, there's no other major sports. Indianapolis has the Colts. There's no baseball. The NBA has done exceptionally well in markets where there's nothing else. Here, we got NFL, Major League Baseball, and now Major League Soccer. And so I just...
But we have some big corporate brands that could support it because that's really important,
But
right?
do they want to?
I don't know. You would know that.
I mean, that's yeah. I've never heard, God, this dude at P&G is dying to bring an NBA team to town.
Because to your point, if you say, hey, listen, if we ignore soccer being in your business, that's just not the right thing to do. If you care about your listenership, if you care, that doesn't make any. So what's the hottest star-studded?
It's the NBA.
It is.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I hear from people my age who, when I mention the NBA, they're like, what are you doing? And I go, every guy that I know who's under the age of 35 has some interest in the NBA. It might not be a team. It could be a player. It could be gambling, which has changed how we talk about sports so much. But in terms of having a franchise here, I mean, if you're the NBA and you're going to expand, there seems to be a school of thought that says, well, they're going to put a team in Seattle, which they should, and then a market like Louisville. But could they put another team in Canada after Vancouver didn't work out? Could they put a team...
Columbus, Ohio or something?
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting. But I just don't think Adam Silver is sitting in his office fending off people who are calling him on a daily basis saying, let's put a team in Cincinnati. And I trust me, I would love it because I love basketball. Pro and college, and I think with the right ownership, anything could work. And again, FC Cincinnati is a prime example because I remember when the press release went out, and it's like, dude, another, we've had so many of these sort of goofy, chintzy minor league teams, and I remember going, well, this is the Lindners, man. And I remember going to their website saying, this doesn't look like the website looked for the Cincinnati Jungle Cats. Yep. This looks different. This feels big time. And they talked about their aspirations for Major League Soccer, and they outlined how they wanted to do it. And there were a lot of people who were like, man, soccer's never going to work here. It's been well, it's worked. So with the right ownership, I think anything can work. In the NBA specifically, again, it's a star event-driven league. Now, there are some nights when it's like, great, the Orlando Magic are coming to town. But then there's nights where it's like, Kevin Durant's coming.
Yep.
LeBron's
or the Bucks are coming, right?
Giannis is coming.
Yeah.
And so, again, you couldn't convince me, hey, the Warriors are here and the gym would be half empty. That wouldn't be the case.
Correct.
So with the right ownership, I think it could work. I just don't. Whenever I hear, well, Cincinnati should get an NBA team, I go, cool, who's going to buy it? Who's going to bring it here? There's never an answer to that.
So if that gets answered, it's a possibility at some point maybe. You still would argue against it.
Well, I mean, how many franchises will they expand to?
Yeah.
How many franchises are going to move?
Yeah.
It's like
cities are not going to want to give up those NBA franchises. They're going to fight to keep them, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, so
It doesn't look like it's the right scenario to make that happen.
No. I mean,
in our lifetimes.
Right now, nobody's talking about any NBA franchise moving.
Yeah.
And if they expand, I've not heard anybody say we're next on the list. And again, like, there are markets where there are consortiums of people who are, hey, we've got the money, we've got the capital, this is our plan, just give us a franchise, we'll pay the entry fee. Nobody's doing that here.
Because that happened with FC.
Yeah.
Yeah, to your point.
Nobody's doing that here with the NHL either. And I people ask, well, would an NHL team work? The Jackets would have to sign off on it, but when the NHL expanded to Columbus, there were folks who were like, well, what about here? And it's like, yeah, cool. You going to buy it? Like, you do need willing investors, and those investors have to come into place before a league expands. Those investors haven't come into place. So
what are you going to do, right?
So it's not going to happen.
So now we're left to talk about college basketball then,
Sure,
since the NBA isn't coming to town. Probably is it your favorite sport, college basketball?
Yes.
I find it hard. So you know the side of the river I'm sitting on.
Mm-hmm.
It's where you were born.
Yeah.
I haven't watched a UK basketball game. I know we're going to talk about Cincinnati, and it's exciting what's happening with Xavier, with the coach coming back.
Sure.
You know what I'm most disappointed for? You're a graduate of the University of Dayton.
Mm-hmm.
They had a shot to win the whole thing during COVID, man.
Yeah.
Right?
Frustrating.
How disappointing was that as a fan?
Devastating. Because when's the next time Dayton's team this year is going to be really good? Are they going to be number one seed good?
Never.
Right.
I'll say it.
So, I wrote this at the time. I'm a UC basketball fan. I'm a Dayton grad. Those are my two teams. Kenyon Martin broke his leg. Kenyon Martin broke his leg. It was devastating because it was like, when's the next time we're going to have the number one pick in the draft? Right? When's the next time that's going to happen? When's the next time Dayton's going to have a lottery pick? And a conference player of the year?
Maybe once in your lifetime.
Right. So that was it. And the fact that, would they have made I think a bigger team would have given them problems, but the fact that you didn't get a chance to even answer the question is, the UC team in 2000, at least, they still had the 6th overall pick in the draft that year. They could still play, and they lost to Tulsa, but Dayton didn't get a chance to take the floor, and that is heartbreaking.
You're going to be talking about this the rest of your life.
Sure. I mean, we're never going to know. And that team was it was the most fun team in college basketball that season by far. They had the National Player of the Year. They would have been a tough out against a quote power conference opponent. And I watched them play Colorado in person, and Colorado kind of bullied them earlier in the season that year. They were susceptible to teams that could really crush them on the glass, but they didn't even get a chance. And that's always going to stick in my craw.
So as a fan, I grew up as a UK basketball fan.
Uh-huh.
I remember the 96 and the 98, just dominant.
Yeah.
Kentucky was dominant. Mm-hmm. And I haven't watched a UK basketball game for the past 2 or 3 years, not one.
Okay.
Not on TV, not live, haven't gone to
Rupp. 2 years ago, you didn't miss much because they were awful. This past year, they were really good until mighty St. Peter's,
But Kentucky fans,
Sure.
regardless, whoever beats them, they're still the best team the next day. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to talk about them, right? But it seems like college basketball for just the normal fan, it just feels different.
It is different.
So there's just not this attachment. We just don't get to see players for an extended period of time. You hope you get to see them for 1 year.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. If you love college basketball, right?
Yep.
So
you're right. Got to talk about it. Yeah.
So Kentucky one and dones, right?
Yep.
Not Villanova. How many Villanova one and dones have there been? Villanova, maybe the best program this century.
Jay Wright just retired.
2 national titles. I think 4 Final Fours. Not a program built on one and dones. UC and Mick, people say what you want about Mick Cronin. Mick went to the tournament 9 straight years. How many one and dones?
No, that pisses me off as a UK basketball
fan.
I
mean, I have folks say, well, they'll say I'm not as into college basketball because of one and dones. And I have 2 replies to that. One would be, well, the one and done rule gave us Anthony Davis in college basketball, and it gave us Kevin Durant in college basketball. That's awesome. I got to watch Anthony Davis as a college basketball player. I got to watch Kevin Durant, one of the best 5 scorers in the history of the NBA.
Would have been straight to the NBA is what you're saying.
Right.
You wouldn't have been able to
So
see
the
it.
one-and-done rule, which I think is great. I'm maybe the loudest proponent of it. It funnels high-end talent to a sport that I like. And by the way, there are options for players who don't want to play college basketball. The one-and-done rule gave us the Zion Williamson experience at Duke, which was immensely fun. So
Who would you rather be, though, a Villanova fan or a UK fan?
Villanova, because they win more. They've won more recently.
And they don't do one-and-dones.
But okay, I mean, there's no one way to do it. Duke didn't do one-and-dones, and then they did one-and-dones, and here's Zion Williamson, and here's Cam Reddish, and here's, there's no one way. The point is there's no one way to do it. The Xavier had terrific teams under Chris Mack, not a lot of one-and-dones. So you could have a great college basketball program and not do it with one-and-dones, and you could also – I think what John Calipari does is underrated. He has to build a new team every year. Now, the variance is wider than it might be at a Villanova. The variance is, on one side, you have the potential to build a team that can win a national title. The year after they won the national title, they didn't go to the NCAA tournament. It's hard to do that. He takes on that challenge. That's not easy. And what's he supposed to do? Not recruit the best players? So
what would you do if you were a top 20 college basketball head coach? What approach would you take?
I'd recruit the best players. So he should say no to the best players? I mean, so UC now is kind of in this, right? So UC's moving to the Big 12. Okay? Big 12 has...
Not this year, next year, right?
Starting next season.
Okay.
Got Kansas, won the national title last year. Got Baylor, won it 2 years ago. Houston's going with them in the Final Four 2 years ago. They're talking with Gonzaga. How you going to compete in that league? Go get the best players. Now, the best players are going to leave. So a coach should say, I don't want the best players. What coach in their right mind? Now, again, there's ways to do it. Villanova is a prime example with players like Jalen Brunson, who's gone on to make hundreds of millions of dollars in the NBA, and Josh Hart and Ryan Archidonacchio. Those are terrific programs, great players. But you mean if the number one high school player in the country showed up in Jay Wright's office and said, I want to be a Villanova Wildcat, that he'll say no? Of course he wouldn't. So this idea that, well, they build it on one-and-dones, because Calipari can get the best players. Now, you still have to morph them into a team, and sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, chemistry is a real thing, and are guys a good fit with each other? And is this guy, should he maybe stay in college for a year, but we can't talk him into it? And by the way, UK is doing something this year that hasn't been done in almost 2 decades. They're returning the player of the year in college basketball. And
every time after that, what has happened?
Won a national title. Tyler Hansbrough won a national title coming back to North Carolina. So if you hate the one-and-done thing, you should love this Kentucky team. Now, Oscar's dealing with health issues, and they've got some other health issues on that team. But the whole one-and-done thing has ruined college basketball. I go, wait a minute. So we got Kevin Durant playing college basketball for a year, and that was bad for the sport? We got Zion Williamson playing college basketball for a year, and that was bad for the sport? We had Anthony Davis, and I know I'm just mentioning those 3. There are many others. At the same time, UC had Gary Clark for 4 years. If you follow the sport, there's no one way. The mark of a successful program isn't you only go to the Final Four. Would anybody say that Xavier's been a failure for the last 30 years?
Nope, no way.
Haven't been to a Final Four.
Yep.
I think folks are now, well, it's the Final Four or bust. Well, if that's the case, one UC basketball team in my lifetime has been a success. I refuse to look at it that way.
Yeah, so that's a great topic about being a fan. Take any sport. Take the NFL. What are there, 32 teams? Mm-hmm. Is that correct? So there's only one that's going to win the Super Bowl every year. Mm-hmm. We went through it last year. That was an amazing run that the Bengals were on. Incredible. How they won. They shouldn't have won any of those playoff games. Mm-hmm. For me being a fan, it's like, wow, man, there's a lot of things that could have gone the other way.
Sure.
And it's awesome how that came together. But I said when I was sitting there and we're in the fourth quarter and that feeling as a fan, it's like, wow, this isn't going in the right direction. They lose 23-20. Was that okay. Yeah. I'm like, guys, this ain't going to be easy to do again.
Yeah.
And so I hate it as a fan. This is me. I'm only okay with one outcome ever. That's why I'm not a good fan.
Yeah.
Because a good fan would just say, I want to see some good football. I want them to be competitive. And if they end up having a 9-7 or a 10-6 year, great. It was better than the 2-3 teams. At the end of the year, I'm not satisfied.
So for me, I don't have a hard time reconciling multiple truths with each other. So I was lucky enough to be at the game.
Okay.
And as soon as it ended, I said, who knows when you're going to be in that position again? Who knows?
And for the chips to fall that way again.
You never know. You never know. At the same time, I think sometimes we are so attached to what is the ultimate outcome going to be that we fail to enjoy the journey. I mean, to me, the fun part of a sports fan is watching the season unfold. And I remember in 2014 and 15, the Bengals had lost in the postseason the previous 3 years. And 14 was different. They had a bunch of injuries. 2015, that's a really good team. Started 8-0. And nonstop it was, yeah, but what about the playoffs? And I'm like, dude, it's October. Like, this team's really good. Who knows what's going to happen in the postseason? Maybe there's injuries, which obviously there were. Maybe there's a bad whistle. Maybe the other team just comes in and plays better.
One game,
right? So so for me, that team, the further we got removed from the playoff disaster, the more I've come to appreciate it, because the team was really good and gave me some experiences as a fan that were awesome. I love that team.
So be our fan coach. Mo, be Mark's fan coach.
When I don't – the beauty of being a sports fan is there's no one way to do it. So I'll hear sometimes from people who are like, I was a diehard. I never missed a game when the Bengals stunk. Like, good for you. Not everybody's that way. Like, but there's no one way to do it. Do it in a way that makes you happy. So for me, I think at times there is too much of a, if you don't win, everybody else is a failure. Did last year's team fail because it lost the Super Bowl? Fuck no. Absolutely not. So now, so this year's team, well, if they don't win the Super Bowl, they fail. Really? 32 teams. We saw last year how random the postseason can be. Sometimes there's factors beyond your control. Sometimes the other team's just better.
Yeah, you're trying to tell me to start this season, any reasonable person would say the Bengals would end up better than Chiefs. Nobody would have said that.
But now, like, if they're 7-10 this year,
we're not happy about it.
That's not a success.
Nope.
So it's not as black and white as we sometimes make it. And again, a sports talk radio topic I avoid is what constitutes a successful season. Oh, no, it's up to you. Like, what UC basketball this year is a prime example. I don't know what that team is going to be. A lot of folks are like, well, if they don't make the tournament, it's a failure. I haven't watched these guys play. I don't know. I don't know.
You're already see. That's what sucks. That's a bad fan. I would say that. I'm not gonna. So what makes it's like you're already predicting if it's gonna be good or not.
But to me, that's up to each individual. Like, that's up to you. The beauty of sports is there's more subjectiveness than I think people are willing to admit. So if you think last season the Bengals were an unmitigated failure because they had 5 consecutive drives in which they didn't score for the first time all season long, and after being picked by many to finish last place in the division, they came this close to winning a championship and lost. If you think that's a failure, you're entitled to that. If you think that is a smashing success, you're entitled to that. If you think it's something in the middle, you're entitled to that as well. Like, there's no absolutes. Somebody sent me a book once, and it was like someone's 10 rules for being a sports fan. The beauty of sports is there are no rules. There's no obligations. It's the fun and games. Lance McAllister once went on the air, and I think he has changed his stance, but he was like incredulous that people hadn't watched like the women's Wimbledon final. And I had watched it because I like tennis. And he's like, that's to me, it's one of your obligations as a sports fan. And I remember I called his show, and I'm like, dude, this is sports. There's no obligations. This is fun and games. I have no obligations. If somebody decided to sleep in instead of getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning to watch Serena Williams, that's their prerogative. It doesn't make them any less of a Cincinnati Reds fan. There are no obligations. So to me, the beauty of it is if you think your team is successful and didn't win, that's okay. And if you think your team is a failure and didn't win, that's okay too. I prefer to, at times, just sort of blend multiple truths. Walking out of that stadium last year, I was infinitely disappointed. I was frustrated about some of the decisions made in the game. I was sobered by the fact that you don't know when you're going to come back. I was deeply appreciative of the season that team put me through as a fan, and very hopeful for the future. All of those things can be true at the same time. Like, sometimes your kid disappoints you and you're really pissed off at him. Doesn't mean you don't love him. You could do more than one thing at a time. That's what I try to do.
So we're supposed to have unconditional love for our
You're
sports
supposed
teams.
to do whatever you want. If you know, like I've had people say, "I know you're going to say I'm a bad fan, but I stopped watching the Reds," and I go, "I don't care. I don't care. Fan however you want. Like I judge you by the kind of parent you are, the kind of person you are. I mean, you don't want to be a fan of something that's. I don't spend any time begging people to like the things that I like, or consuming things the way that I do.
You know what? What I think here, I'm sitting here, me running a sales company.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, there's correlations about the world we're in. I won't touch on any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's probably an awesome approach that we should take to life. And I'm not trying to get too philosophical.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting here saying, if all of these crazy passions that we have around this ideology about everything, if we took that approach that you just talked about, quit trying to impose your thing on everyone
my
else.
worldview is best. I just mind my own business. Here's what I do. In my radio show, I tell you how I feel. If you don't agree, that's okay. Call me. We'll have a discussion. That's the part that I hate the most. People are more unwilling to do that. But there's a thing now where it's like if you go on social media and you post like a food opinion, and people come back at you, and like, okay, you don't have to like mayonnaise on your French fries. Like, you don't have to.
But you can.
I do. I actually personally don't, but if you do, that's okay. Like, I spend less time on. I just worry about myself, man. And I tell you how I feel, and if you don't agree, well, that's fine. My job is to do an entertaining show. So the sports thing to me, the sports fan thing to me is the same way. Like, I'm just never going to get into soccer. Okay, don't. Or like, I'm done,
Has this evolved, this perspective? Because it's a very grown-up, mature perspective.
Well, it's the only time anybody's ever said my perspective is mature, but yeah, sure. I mean,
I didn't say it's right mature.
When I was a kid,
Yeah.
I thought everybody should agree with me, and anybody who didn't was an idiot. And you're not watching. In the '90s, I grew up in the '90s with the Bengals. Like, well, one day they're going to be good, and I'm going to like you weren't there, and it's not going to matter as much to you. Now I'm old. It's like, let people just do what they want, man. And so if, again, the whole like being a bad fan thing, if the Reds are terrible right now, and I know fans aren't watching and paying attention, if they're good in a few years, if those people are at the ballpark every night, am I going to say to them, well, you weren't there in 2000? I'm like, no. I'm like, I hope you're having fun, man.
I get it. I understand.
I just worry about myself.
Yeah, it's tough to go through.
More people should just worry about themselves. Honestly, guy, like, it sounds selfish. I have friends of mine who get frustrated with me. I'm like, I just worry about me. You don't like it? That's your.
They still come around,
problem.
don't they?
So
they're still
most
friends.
of them, thankfully, yes.
Hey, so let's talk a little bit outside of sports about. Thanks for sharing all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think you've made us understand things a little bit more.
Sure.
Right? You have. And so, where'd you start your path of becoming today the voice, and don't give me a humble pushback, the voice of Cincinnati sports, because you just are. It just is. So me and you aren't any great friends, right? We came into contact through a brief second 20 years ago. I just brought it up before the show.
Yeah.
So, but I know you and the brand and your voice, and when you talk sports, whether you agree with you or not, you know what the hell you're talking about from an evaluation, from digging. You just do. And so you're going to share your perspective with a bunch of information. How have you gotten here to the 45-year-old Mo in 2022, that path?
The path being 45, or
the path being all these years that brings you here, all the pain and the suffering and the not making any money, and
well,
here you go. What's that look like? And
I knew at a very young age I wanted to be on the radio, and that was the main thing to me. It wasn't. I hear sometimes from kids who are like, God, I'd love a job in sports. And I would say, well, what are you talking to me for? I don't work in sports. For me, it was I wanted to work in radio. I cannot pinpoint for you the exact moment that I made that determination, but it was really young. And as hokey and again, understanding our age, so this is pre-podcast, pre-internet, pre a lot of different options. Radio was just a more sort of omnipresent part of everybody's lives when I was growing up, and it was a big part of mine. I was in a lot of long car rides with my dad. I was in a lot of long car rides with my mom, and I spent summers at my grandma's house in Taylor Mill. My dad loved talk radio. My mom loves music. And my grandmother loved talk radio. My grandfather loved the Reds. The radio was on always. When I was 9 years old, I asked for a television for my room. My mom gave me an alarm clock. So, all right, I was in my room. I wanted to be entertained. I had to turn on the radio. Sounds really stupid. But I'd listen, and the folks who were on always sounded like they were having so much fun. Whether it was FM, disc jockey. There's a time in my life as a kid where I thought the coolest job in the world would be to be like a nighttime top 40 DJ. They just sounded like they were having a blast. And then as I kind of got older and I was exposed more just as a listener to talk shows, there's not many 12, 13-year-old kids who are listening to a lot of AM radio.
700.
Yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s. I was. And the person on the air just always sounded like they were having so much fun. And so I would always sort of theater of the mind stuff, imagine like, what is it like working where that person's working? What is it like behind the scenes? What is it? What goes into this guy or woman doing a show or playing music? I mean, like this doesn't sound like work. There has to be a work aspect to it. What is it? So there, as a kid, there was always a fascination with the medium. There was always a basic fascination, and admittedly, there still is, in the concept of I say it here and it comes out milliseconds later somewhere else. Now that you factor in 7 and 10 second delay and stuff like that, it's a little bit different. But that to this day still, I mean, I find myself occasionally in studio just going, God, what I'm doing right now, people are hearing in God knows how many different places. So there was that. That's where it started. Now, being a kid who was obviously a huge sports fan, as I got to be a little bit older, I started to wonder, how do you mesh the two passions? Because I loved and obviously still love games and sports and talking about sports. But more than anything, in high school, the lady who helps you determine where you're going to go to college asked me, like, what do you want to do? And I want to work at a radio station. She's like, well, do you know what you want to do? I'm like, no, I just want to work at a radio station. So I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what you had to study. I knew nothing about that. But that's what drove it. And then I went to Dayton.
Did you go there with the intention? They have a good program?
The program was okay, admittedly, but I went there for one reason. They had a campus radio station that you could be on the air day one. So by contrast, first of all, I would have loved to have gone to UC because I like the basketball team. The program they have now is excellent. Didn't exist.
Broadcast program.
It literally did not exist, so that wasn't an option. Western Kentucky had a program. They had a campus radio station. You had to be, and again, this is 1990. I started college in 95. You had to have completed 2 years of behind-the-scenes stuff and coursework to be on the air, and I thought I to this day think that's the dumbest thing of all time. The idea is to get practice.
That's it.
Start immediately. So I went to UD for that one reason. I knew nothing else about the school. I knew it was an hour away, and I wanted to go away but not be too far away. So an hour from where I lived. But I didn't go there with anybody that I went to high school with. I didn't really know. I kind of knew one kid who left after about 3 weeks. So I went because they had a campus radio station. And then I came to enjoy other aspects of the experience,
right.
but that's what drove it.
So since then, you're a 18, 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And you go up there and you're jumping on the mic day one.
Yeah.
Did you have any clue what you were doing?
None. I don't now. But
you do understand how to handle a mic. Now you do, man.
First time I was on the air, I was on the 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. shift, Flyer Radio 99.5, Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings.
A lot of listeners on there.
Well, it's campus radio, so, I mean, the audience isn't huge to begin with. So 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., I'm a freshman. I was on the air before I ever took a class. Classes start on Wednesday. I sign up to be on the campus radio station like the Friday prior at orientation. I'm on the air Tuesday morning. So it's in the student union. The only people awake are like the cafeteria people preparing, breakfast. And I go on the air, and I'm coming out of a song, and the rules were pretty stringent for new people. It was like, you have 10 seconds to talk, back sell the previous 3 songs, front sell the next 3 songs, and then get out. So I come on the air, and I'm like, hey, that was 311 and Green Day, whoever. My name's Maurice. And just locked up. So it really hasn't gotten that much better since. But that's why I went. And campus radio was cool. College radio was cool. I came to be frustrated with the lack of willingness to experiment and be creative by the people who ran it. But in terms of practical experience and just abject fun, it was awesome.
So then the evolution of, weren't you a producer at 700 WLW?
Yeah, so when I was at UD, I met a girl by the name of Lori Bach. And Lori had done an internship the previous summer at WLW, and she loved her experience, and I just asked her, like, well, how do you do that? Because admittedly, Dayton's a great school, but the broadcast program, the academic advisor that I had, I remember going to him going like, well, how do you, I'm going to do all this coursework. How can you help me get a job? He's like, I don't know. Like they weren't, that program at the time, and I don't know if it's different, that program at the time, they weren't great at helping you outside the building. So this girl that I had met gave me the phone number of Mike McConnell's producer. I called him. Mike went to UD, so I figured that was maybe my in. Mm-hmm. Called him, and I said, my name's Mo. I'd like to be an intern. And so the vetting process, he's like, well, I need you to come down here. We just have to make sure you don't have 2 heads. So it wasn't really a job interview. I just went. I was smart in that I had done my homework and listened to Mike a little bit, so I kind of knew what I was walking into. Hired me as an intern, and that was an awesome experience. It's an experience that most media companies don't offer anymore, which is stupid because it's a great way to cultivate young talent. And I thought, like, well, this is going to be what determines whether this is something I want to do, because I'll either think it's awesome or I'll go, God, this is stupid. I'll go become a teacher or something.
You really had that thought, that 20-year-old guy.
Like, this summer, I will use this summer to figure out, like, is this really something I want to do? And immediately the answer was yes. I mean, within minutes of being there, I just, like, these people are having fun, man. Like, and to me, I remember that more than anything, just going like, look at these people. First of all, nobody's wearing a tie. Hate getting dressed up. These people look like they're just having so much fun. How do I do? And they're getting paid for it. How do I do this? And so I think my enthusiasm for being there and for learning was transparent enough to people that, there's frankly, again, there's not really interns anymore, but there were 2 types of interns. There were the people who were like, oh, yeah, I'll do this. And there were people who were like, holy shit, man, this is awesome. I was a holy shit, man, this is awesome guy. And I think
that's easy to work with.
I think folks are like, well, we'll give this guy something to do because I really care about it. And so I did that during the summer between my sophomore year and junior year.
So 97.
Went back to school, and winter break came, and we're off for a month, and I didn't really have anything to do. And so I called and said, hey, like, you want some free labor for a month? I'd love to come back. And they're like, yeah, I mean, it's radio stations love cheap labor. So they're like, and by cheap, me being free, I was, in the summer I had gotten class credit. This was just, I got some free time. I just want to hang out. And lucky enough for me, was butting up right against the holidays. Somebody came to me and said, we need someone here on Christmas. And, this is where you lose a lot of people because they're like, wait a minute, Christmas? Like, yeah, we're not turning the station off. We're going to be on. They were playing Christmas music on Christmas morning on these gigantic reel-to-reel tapes. They needed somebody to come in and play those tapes from 5 a.m. to noon. And the assistant program director at the time is like, any shot you would want to do that. And I was like, yes, I'm in. And they said, in order for us to do that, we have to make you an employee. Now, me being an idiot, I'm like, does that mean you'll pay me? And they're like, yes, we're offering you a job. Day one is Christmas morning. Do you accept? And I'm like, hell yes. So that was that's what I did. I started as a board operator. So that became, and this is a really long answer to your question, that became a part-time job on the weekends, running the board. I had also I had just applied for a similar sort of job at a station in Dayton. And I did that for 2 weeks. And then they found out that I had a part-time job at a competing company in Cincinnati. So they were really cool about it. They're like, which one would you rather have? I'm like, that one. So they were really, really nice about it. But anyway, that turned into I
board
operator on the weekends, with occasionally going in at night during the week. And then the next summer came between junior and senior year. And I also worked on campus at the time in the printing and design shop, which just paid my tuition basically. And they asked, would you like to stay? I had a really great living situation in Dayton. We rehabbed a guy's house and 4 others. And the first one we rehabbed, he let us live in for free.
Because you rehabbed it.
For $1 a month. It was great. So I had a great living situation. So I'm like, I could live in Dayton for free, work at the print shop, and then drive down to Cincinnati for my weekend radio work. Pretty good. And I remember asking, hey, they've offered me a chance to kind of stay on during the summer. At the same time, I'm not going to have class. Any chance of my role expanding? And as a matter of fact, Jim Scott's back and needs a producer, and we kind of thought about you. And I jumped at that opportunity. And that made me full-time. And now what that involved was, once the school year started, my last year at UD, because I had to get my degree. No male in my family had ever gotten a degree, so I wasn't going to quit. Man, being at Dayton, getting up at 3 a.m, driving to Mount Adams, an hour away, working till about 11:30, driving back to Dayton, taking class, maintaining some sense of social life, and doing that for, from August to early May. And it was tough, but for me it was, I don't have to worry about what I'm going to do after school when I graduate, and this is temporary. So that was my first full-time job, and I did that for 4 or 5 years, and did a few other things, and eventually conveyed that I had an interest in being on the air. Was often patted on the head, told no. Thought a few times about quitting. But honestly,
what kept you going in those thoughts when you're like, those quiet thoughts, like, I'm going to quit, screw this, man. They're not giving me the opportunity. I'm putting in all this time.
Because I really enjoyed the work. It was really fun. And that and just no skills to do anything else. What was sort of different for me is I at the end of my college run at UD, I met the woman who would become my wife. We got married at a really early age. So any thought that I had about being one of these guys that kind of bounces around to different radio stations around the country, I wasn't going to do that. We were here now, and maybe had I not done that, things would have been a little bit different. So I wasn't that interested, and still to this day, I'm not really that interested in working in radio in other cities. So it was radio here or something else here.
And this is what you wanted. You're like, this is the path that kept you centered, stick with it.
Those first 5 years working in the morning with Jim were the best. It was so much fun. And I learned, the most important thing is I learned so much. But yeah, I just, all I wanted to do as a kid was work at a radio station. Now I was. Now, obviously, I didn't want to be a producer my whole career.
They kept telling you no, patting you on the head. We're not putting you on the air.
And understandably so.
Yep.
Look,
you don't know as a kid, right?
Well,
you don't know that you shouldn't be on yet.
Your audience is a bunch of guys in their 40s. You're going to put a 22-year-old kid on. You can't relate to them. So, but I knew I was surrounded by people who were doing what it was I eventually wanted to do. And I've made very few smart decisions in my life, but one that I made that was pretty good was I'm really going to observe these people. And I'm going to watch and listen and sort of by osmosis, just how do they prepare? How do they do their shows? How do they pivot from one topic to another? How do they handle breaking news? How do they engage the audience? How do they promote themselves? How do they handle the business aspect of it? So when they finally started to say yes, I had a bunch of really informal training just because observation is so important. So as much as I've often wondered, like, what if I went to Chillicothe, Ohio, or Saginaw,
They'll
Michigan?
put me on the air there.
Yeah, right, yes,
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
Or at least I would have had a shot. I would have gone on the air and had no idea what I was doing. And at least when I did go on the air, while I certainly had a long way to go and frankly still do, I at least had years of watching people do what it was that I wanted to do, who do it really well. That really, really paid off. But
So what's that go to? So you're the producer on Jim Scott's show.
So I was that for 5 years, and then they had a position, and I didn't want to take it because I feared this was going to send me in a different direction that I wanted to go in. But the company owned at the time 6 radio stations, and on the AM side, we actually at the time we had 8. On the AM side, we had 4. There's a producer staff that sort of handles all the stations. They had a position for somebody whose job was to oversee the producers. I was offered a chance to take that job. I took it. A, it was going to be a little bit more money. B, I was kind of burned down to waking up at 4 a.m. So I did it, but I thought, like, now, okay, the steps from here involve maybe I'll be a program director one day, and I try to convince myself that's what I wanted to do. And I think I'd have been okay at it, but that work didn't seem. So I thought to myself, if I do this is going to send a message that I want to go in the direction of management. How do I let them know that that's not really what I want to do, but in the short term, this job makes a lot of sense. And so fortunately, I had folks that became comfortable with me filling in occasionally. And I did that, like 04, 05, 06. And the work started to be steady enough that I got okay at it.
You can stay focused. You're like, this is evolving.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Well,
I see a path forward now. It seems like if I keep going, there will be opportunities.
I waited. Yeah. Yes. But I'll never forget my surprise in 2007. I was approached with a chance to host a show every day with a guy by the name of Greg Doyle. And I'm like, well, when? They're like, well, we're going to start Monday. I'm like, why? So that was it. And so Greg and I did a show together for about 8 or 9 months. And that was exceptionally beneficial to have a partner at the beginning, especially from somebody with a complete non-radio background. That really sort of was educational.
Why was that helpful? Because it wouldn't make sense.
It was helpful to watch. It was helpful to Greg, to this day, is a terrific writer and a journalist. He doesn't care who wins. He doesn't care who loses. He's interested in the personalities and the stories. To have somebody who consumes sports through that filter, I had never been exposed to. So having that, instead of just two, my angle was and still is, I'm just a fan. Well, here's a fan, but you do have to understand how the other other mediums work. Greg taught me an immense amount, and I'd like to think my radio background kind of rubbed off on him as well.
Who had the brains to put that team together?
I don't know what desk that was birthed at, but
because someone made the right call.
I think I was given a chance out of more. I don't think anybody saw this diamond in the rough talent. I think it was, look, this kid's worked here for a long time. He's done everything we've asked. He's been passable at everything we've asked him to do. He clearly cares. Let's give him a shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And he'll know and we'll know. And it's not like there won't be things for him to do here. I think I was given a chance out of a reward for waiting. I don't think it was.
How long from the time that you took that Christmas Day job
Yeah.
of the switchboard operator and watching
Yeah.
the news, how long was it from that day on Christmas of 97, 96?
97, yeah.
Till when? They came to you in 2007.
Our first show, I think, was May 21st.
10 years.
07. Yeah, 10 years. 10 years. Now, again, like, by 2006, I was, the radio station at the time had a full-time morning show, full-time midday show, full-time afternoon show, so lots of vacations being taken. So I don't know if I was ever the top choice, but it got to the point that I was on semi-regularly.
Hey, we need somebody to fill in. Hey, call Mel.
And then just kind of being around the station, you end up, people hear your name and you do. So, but I was on, but yeah,
10 years. You didn't,
10
for 10 years.
Yeah.
You didn't have a show that was Mo's show.
No. And then Greg left at the end of 07, so in 08, it became, from 9 to noon, it became mine. Yeah, that's a weight that in real time, was arduous. And looking back, it was worth it from the standpoint that when I was on the air, I knew how things worked.
Yep.
And at that point, I was 30 years old, so I had some life experience behind me. But yeah, I think I was given a chance, not so much because anybody thought I would be good. I think it was honestly like, all right, man, this kid's done everything.
They gave you a shot because you earned it. You earned it.
And it was like, if we don't give this dude a shot, at some point he's going to go do something else.
Yep.
I mean, I remember in 05, the job that I had required more hours, and this is sort of before everybody's working remotely, obviously, more time. I mean, if somebody couldn't run a morning show, I was there. If somebody couldn't run a Reds game, I mean, I was working nonstop. I was producing UC basketball and football.
You knew one answer in 2005, and it's one word, and it was yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was working an insane amount of hours, and I loved it. But I remember in 05 kind of going to my boss going like, this isn't sustained. I'm not 21 anymore. I'm 28. I do have a marriage, and
this isn't equitable here.
Yeah, and he made it better for me. But I made it known, like, I ain't going to be doing this in 5 years. I don't know what I'll be doing. So I think I was, all right, Mo's been here a long time. He genuinely has a passion for the medium. He's funny in the hallways, which is subjective. Let's see. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does.
But if they didn't see value in you, they're business people.
Yeah.
If they didn't see, we really think this guy can. He's got to prove it. Let's see. But we think he can. Yeah, he's earned it. Yeah, he deserves it. But there's a lot of people like that in this world, in all the mediums. They don't get the shot.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about it. It came at no risk to them because it's not like we're going to let you do this and then we're going to pay you 5 times more. Yeah. You're going to do this. And honestly, this is maybe a little bit more than I should reveal, but I should have said, cool, that's a higher profile. Can I make more money? I was so happy to be on the air, I didn't care. But it came at very little risk to them.
Is there a contract that comes with that? Or they could just let you go the next day?
I was what they call it, at-will employee at the time.
Yeah.
Things have
So you screw something up the next day, they fire you, they don't know your opinion.
And for a while I was still doing, it wasn't like, all right, that job you've been doing for a few years, it's over. Like they had to find somebody else. And so for a while there was a bit of an overlap. But that was okay.
How many people in your life were supportive on this all-in effort?
In my life?
In your life, family members, friends. How many were supportive that you should have gone all in like this?
All of them. In my life, all of them.
How important was that?
Immensely. My first wife was immensely important in that regard. Immensely. And, I grew up at that radio station. I mean, started there when I was 19. So my early adulthood friends were kind of all radio people. It wasn't much time for a social life, honestly.
And they were all 10 and 15 and 20 years older than you.
Yeah, my best friend who passed away earlier this year was a guy named Rich Wahlberg, who was sort of the guy who took me under his wing. He was 11 years older than me. So an immense amount of support from my family. Nobody, to my first wife's credit, when I was making no money, and I mean no money, working in a business that I loved, she never said, you got to do something else. No, there were times where it was like, hey, you've got some time in the afternoons to go sell hats at the mall. Why don't you go do that, or work at a golf course, or we once took up a gig delivering phone books together. There was that, but no, the people in my life could not have been more friends, family, co-workers in particular. Could not have. I had people go to bat for me at the radio station to say you should give Mo a chance. I'm not unaware of that. That did happen. I had people in my corner that would say, like, what's the harm in letting Mo go on the air and just seeing what he has? And that was important. But I also earned that because I did my job well. Since then, I've done it very poorly. But up until that, I had the right attitude. And I think people saw that and said, like, we know what this guy wants to do. What's the worst thing that can happen? Put him on.
You're the Rudy Rudiger of talk radio, man.
Boy, I hate Rudy. Rudy's a pain in the ass. I'd like a better comparison than that. I am proud of there's lots of different ways. There's lots of different entryways into radio. I took the most direct route, but I think the most difficult. I didn't have a dad who worked in the business, or I didn't really have nobody opened the door. I mean, that's okay if it happens to you. I didn't come to it from – there's a lot of people who come to radio because their success is in something else. I wasn't a success at anything, and one might argue still am not. But I am proud of the fact that I took the most direct route and the most difficult, and it's had some payoff.
So I'm just sitting here listening to this story, and from what I know about business and sales, probably not nearly what a lot of really successful business people in Cincinnati, but it's been enough.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here reflecting. I'm like, man, if every 18 and 20 and 22 and 24-year-old young kid that we all were, if they go down this same path of effort and commitment and all in and not looking at the checkbook and support of people in your life, man, that is the path to success in literally anything I've seen.
Maybe.
It is. It's not a maybe.
No,
it is, man.
There's...
You fought for it. You earned it. And at the end of the day, you deserved it, because what happens is, and there's this thing going around the world now where there's a huge argument. We had I forget who we were talking to on the podcast, but you put out a reel. Jack put out a reel. And it's like there's this big debate between, should you do a bunch of free labor? This just came out a month ago.
Yeah.
Should you do a bunch of free labor so that you're seen? So that somebody says, hey, you've earned the opportunity. Let's give it to this kid. And there's this, unfortunately, this younger generation, there's a lot of people talking this bullshit about, hey, no, only do what you're rewarded for financially. Don't do anything until you're paid for it. Well, you know what? You're not going to create a lot of opportunities. You're not going to get to do something new. The only way you get a shot at doing something, somebody's like, hey, you want to do this that no one else wants to do. That's the only way you got a shot. It's very rare that something that is very sought after is given to someone who hasn't done it before. Just doesn't happen. Yeah. And so, man, you bring a lot of humility, but there's a lot of kids out here now in this Instagram world, this social media world. There's a lot of kids that are looking for the silver bullet, looking for the easy way. How do we get there quicker? It sure seems like everybody else has it. No, man. This is the tough, grinded out, hard work, determination, disciplined effort, the path you've gone on, man.
Yeah, I don't know that applies to everybody.
But it should.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how other industries work. I just know the way things worked when I went was I'm gonna have to work for free for a while, and maybe that's not how it should. I haven't thought about that too deeply. I'm for anybody being able to get what they can. So if you could do work that makes you better and gains experience and find a way to get compensated, I'm here for that. But
that's so rare is my point.
But if it doesn't exist and you still want to do it, you might have to suck it up. I mean,
why do we find it so hard to give the young Moes and Marks the advice that we were willing to follow then? It's like we want to protect people from, I had to, but hey, if you don't have to, guess what? If you want what Mo's got, you better do it.
Here's what I'll tell you. I've been lucky in the course of our show being on the air. I've always had good producers. Always. I've always had good. I've always demanded good producers, and I've always demanded a lot of them. And I think the reason I demand a lot of them is because I did it. And I will always tell them, I'm going to make you do some stuff that you probably don't want to do. I'm going to make you do some stuff that's going to make you feel like you're my servant, assistant, or secretary. I'm going to make you do some stuff that you're going to go, this is tedious and boring. You will not do anything I didn't do. You will not do anything that I believe is purposeless. I'm not going to give you busy work, but you're not ever going to be asked to do anything that I wasn't asked to do. And yeah, sometimes the workload compared to what you're getting paid is not going to match up.
It never does in the beginning.
But I'm telling you, it worked for me. And so I've always been very proud of the producers that I've had have taken on a great attitude because I've let them know you are doing exactly what I did. And the payoff for me is this. Now, my payoff might not be yours. You might not want to be a talk show host. You might want to be a talk show host who's making gobs more money than I am. But I did this, and now I have the job that I want. And so, I can't ensure that you're going to get the job you want, but I can tell you the work you're doing is nothing I didn't do. I think that's important. Now, in terms of what people, I believe our industry woefully underpays kids who want to get in, woefully. And to me, if you want the absolute best and brightest, I think you got to be more competitive. That's an industry thing. That's been the case since I was a kid. I mean, I went to college with people who wanted to work in radio, who saw the wages and were like, well, screw that. I mean, relative to my intelligence, I can go make more money doing something I didn't study. I think as an industry, if you really want people to view this as a potential career, there's two schools of thought. One would say, well, this weeds out the pretenders, and there's validity to that. But there's also do we want to attract people? And the way you attract people isn't by paying them a pittance. And so I've always fought against the notion that, you have to pay people peanuts that start in the business. Because if you want a real healthy industry, then you want a pipeline, and the way you build a pipeline is get people to want to be in it. Then let's see if they really want to do the work. Then let's see if they really understand. I always joke, we hire kids, and it's like, all right, well, you're going to work on Sunday from noon to 8. Like, what? Like, dude, that's how it is, man. Like, we don't turn it off on Christmas. We don't turn it off on Sundays. You kind of learn those lessons once you begin. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of a cautionary tale if you look at how I started and got to what I wanted to do. But I also think there's a few things worth emulating. But what you can't do, like, I never understand people who work in radio who don't have a passion for it. I don't get it, because I did. I can't make you, if you want to work in our field, I can't make you view the medium the same way I did, and you're not gonna, because kids are listening to things and consuming things that aren't talk radio the way I was when I was a kid. So I have talked to kids who start working for us, and they might want to be on the air one day, but it's like, well, what shows do you listen to? Well, I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast. Like, that's cool. Bill's awesome. He doesn't do a radio show. This is a radio so it's a little bit different, like there's a lot of people that join the business and they don't have as much background in it. And so you got to learn the background of the business before you can develop a passion for it. For me, I understood radio because I grew up listening to it and cared about it and had a passion for it. So it's a little bit, I think, in our field in particular, it's a little bit apples and oranges to compare me at 18, 19, 20 versus the people who are entering our business. Now, other businesses I can't speak for because I've never really worked in any.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's apples and oranges based upon when Mo started in 95, 96, 97 compared to now? Or you just really?
On what
it takes for a young person. If you're trying to say, from what you're arguing, if a Mo comes along now in 2022,
mm-hmm.
that young kid going to Dayton follow the same path, he doesn't have the same opportunity, doesn't have the same chance?
We have a young man working for us by the name of Austin Elmore, who produces and is on the air on a pretty fairly regular basis. He podcasts for years. before he worked for us. We didn't have podcasts. So I tell kids all the time, if you want to start broadcasting, do it today.
Get on the mic.
Go get a mic, get a computer, get a camera. Let's go. I mean,
because you understand what the repetition does for you.
Well, the repetition and the audience building, I mean, you can build a brand on your own. If you're good, people, especially via social media, people are going to find you. Yeah. So when I started, it was I have to go to where the microphones are. Now, you can bring the microphone to you. Now, you got to get people to see it, and, social media is a big part of that. Those things didn't exist when I began. So practical experience is infinitely more easier to accumulate now than it was when I started. You don't need someone to say yes. Now, you might need someone to coach you and teach you to be better and help you and help you with the fundamentals. But I needed someone to say yes. And so now we have people who have, this is good. They've got experience in some form of broadcasting, but radio is different. And I think the thing is too, is like, there's a huge business component to what we do. I mean, if there wasn't, it wouldn't exist.
That you didn't know in the beginning.
None. I mean, there's a huge business component, right? So
if you're not making money to pay all the people that work for that station, to pay whoever is the owner, shareholder, if they can't drive revenue, you ain't in business.
If they can't monetize my show, it doesn't exist. If they can't monetize me,
yeah. So we'll give some of the shout-outs to some of your people. Like, I wasn't even planned, but I've noticed it. Like, so you have, over the past 12 months, maybe it's more recent than that, so Skyline Chili. So in Cincinnati, we're this our chilier noodles. The Greeks brought it here for some reason, right? And so they're noodles, it's what we call chili, it's cheese, and sometimes it's onions, and sometimes it's beans for 3, 4, and 5 ways. Mm-hmm. And so now Skyline Chili, you've gone on with them, and I'm assuming that they are a good, financial sponsor. They've decided partnering with this Mo guy is going to give us some exposure. It's good for branding.
Yeah,
I mean, Long Necks Sports, so Long Necks Bar and Grill, there's 3 in northern Kentucky.
If nobody advertised,
right,
the stations would go away.
100%.
If nobody advertised, there'd be no personality.
Yep.
So,
and they didn't come with you.
Yeah.
They had to say, this guy's talented and skilled. There's people listening to him because he's putting out a product. Hey, that's a place we want to be seen. Let's give him some money.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the decision to put you on is going to be based on 2 things. 1, will this person cost us money? 2, will this person make us money? There's a difference. I mean,
so our new guy, Austin.
Yeah, so
he's got the ability and the talent to make you some money.
So that's the business part of it is,
it's essential.
I always tell people there's a difference between broadcasting and radio. Broadcasting is what we're doing right now. Radio is the business, and it takes a while to learn how the business works. And so, whenever I'm asked about, like, well, why do you guys do this, or why do you put this on the air, or why don't you do this, the answer is always the same. Either we can make money off of it, or we can't make money off of it. That is the answer 100% of the time. People don't like that, but that's how it is. We get asked, why do you guys carry University of Louisville football and basketball? Because we make money off of it.
Because there's enough people that want to listen to it.
It's not even that. We make money off of it. We would carry Atlanta Hawks games if somebody said,
we want you to carry the Hawks. We're going to pay for the advertising.
You can make – I mean, that's – so any and all decisions are – for me, any and all decisions are based on maximizing the audience to benefit our advertisers, and any decisions management makes is – financially motivated. There are other things that are factor in, but yeah, the part of it that takes, for me at least, took a long time to learn was how the business of radio works. And there's no course, there's no formal training you can have to really understand that.
So it's your job, for the Jim Scotts and those people that gave you shots, it's your job now to pass some of this stuff on, right?
A very, very simple lesson. My first year, Jim Scott would do 18 to 20 live commercials a show, right? I had a programming log, and it would say, like, all right, you cross the commercials off as you air them, and then if there was a live read, if it was Grippo's potato chips, all right, Jim, you got Grippo's, here we go, right? We missed a Kroger commercial. I just forgot to tell him to do it.
Shit job as a producer that day.
100%. And the amount of meetings and memos, I was like 21 years old, that I had, and it was like.
Because you missed that commercial.
We missed, like, do you know what Kroger is paying for those 60 seconds?
This can't happen.
This cannot
Why
happen.
did it? Can never happen again.
Right.
You're like, what do you mean, guys? It was one commercial.
And so I've seen people make that mistake, and it's the same thing I was told 20 plus years ago. Like, you think we're just playing those spots out of the goodness of our heart? Like, no, they paid for that. You have to give it to them. That's one of the very first lessons I learned. Like, all right, I spoke to a class once, and
at UC or Dayton or
it was at UC, and I said, "What's the purpose of a TV or radio station?" And to inform the public and provide entertainment, all these answers. I go, no, the purpose of a radio station or a TV station is to play commercials. That's the answer. That's why they exist. That's the money making. Now, my job is to keep you
to be entertaining.
Is to build the biggest audience for those advertisers and to keep you long enough that when I play a commercial, you listen to it. That's the game. And so that part of it, I think it takes a while to sort of, for a lot of us, for me in particular, to really sort of grasp that.
Okay, give us a Mo Egger Tuesdays at Christian Moerlein. This pimento cheeseburger that you supposedly say is the most awesome thing. Give us your 5 to 10 to 15 second advertisement for that Tuesday night for that burger. Let's see if he's got it.
First of all, it's a full-size burger. A lot of burgers, they look like pancakes.
I like those, Mo.
There's nothing wrong with that. This is a full-size burger. I'm a big pimento cheese guy. If you can create a pimento cheese almost crust on the burger, there's nothing better. You drop some bacon on it, you add your veggies, and then a little black pepper aioli. That's my jam. I make that at home all the time. It's phenomenal.
And they can come get it for $8
on
Tuesdays,
on
unless
Tuesdays.
Unless it's a Monday night game that ends up being Wednesdays.
Yeah, I haven't met anybody who said they didn't like it. Now, I've met some people who's like, I'm not a big pimento cheese guy, and it's like, oh, cool, get a different burger.
Jack and Dave, I call bullshit on this. I bet between the three of us here in this studio, at least one of us is going to say that burger sucks.
No, because the Moerlein Lager House has an amazing kitchen staff, and they'll do a great job with the burger.
If we send it back 4 times. And we're not blaming them. You know, this goes back to who gets blamed in sports organizations. We're blaming the creator. We're not blaming the preparers. We're not blaming the food service
provider. So what I would tell people, it's like with anything else, know what you're ordering. So if you don't like pimento cheese, don't get it.
No, I'm saying you did a good job on selling me that maybe I'm going to give this thing a shot.
So like a female friend of mine said, I think pimento cheese is gross. And I go, you're not going to like the burger. Like you're not going to like, so don't get it. Get something else. But if you like pimento cheese and you like bacon and if you like black pepper aioli, we combine those things on a burger and it's top notch. It's big league. And if like those ingredients aren't your jam, then you won't like it. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. You don't, it's like, I don't like chocolate. Well, guess what? Don't reach in your kid's candy bag and get a Hershey bar out. You're not going to like it.
How much candy
chocolate.
Did you just eat for Halloween?
I've tried to be conservative.
So what's that? Is it a half bag this year versus a full bag?
No, you know what? The only thing I've taken for my kid is I took 1 small bag of Sour Patch Kids.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Were they the watermelon ones?
They were. Yeah, those are good.
How good are those?
Those are top notch.
So, hey, man, it's wrapping up about 1 o'clock here.
Yeah.
We're going to try to get you to spend 10 more minutes doing some short takes across the hall.
I have to take a phone call from a radio station in Charlotte at 1:15.
Okay, so if we're done by 1:10?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, man, thanks for coming in. This is it's fun. It's fun for me. It was entertaining for us.
It was fun for me.
Yeah. I think you've enlightened us on the world of everything sports, man, in Cincinnati. Yeah. And I hope that going forward in 2023, 4 and 5, that the Reds give us more things to cheer about. Because if not, we're going to be sitting there in the sun, losing 10-2, hoping and praying that, maybe one day we have that awesome team to root for again, and while we're drinking $18 beers.
The beers at the ball game are not that much, but yeah.
Do they have pimento burgers?
No, they should. They should sell pimento cheese sandwiches like they do at Augusta National.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Thanks for coming in, man. So is it moegger.com? What is it? What are we here? You say that's not the website.
No, that's not the website. You don't want to go there.
But you should go there and start promoting it like this should be this guy's site. But you're on all the time. But you have the Moegger podcast you can find.
If you have the Google,
the
just
Google,
type that in. You're good. You'll find
the Google. Go find Mo. Thanks, man. Appreciate you coming in.
Of course.
Any parting shots?
No.
Wow. Thank you to
2 hours that I didn't get paid for.
Thank you to we're monetizing it somehow, man. Yeah. Somehow I'm going to create 50 cents on this thing. Jack and Dave, thank you guys. It's awesome. I told you that what Jack's past in sports life is. So thank you guys. We'll head out of here and go do some short takes.